All right, welcome to chapter 2 of the Actix web Rust tutorial, and today we're going to be talking about routing. So really quickly before we begin, I want to apologize for the end of my first chapter video when I mentioned that we would be talking about extractors such as path parameters and query parameters. I didn't really realize that my notes were incorrect when ending off that video. And we're actually going to be talking about HTTP methods, route parameters, wildcards, route scoping, nested route, resource routing, and route ordering, default routes, H04 handling, and route guards. So those are the main topics we're actually going to cover in this chapter. Just wanted to clarify that in case you're watching this right after chapter 1 and things are a little bit different than I mentioned. So I apologize for that. But let's go ahead and get into the basics of HTTP methods. These are honestly super simple in Actix Web. You pretty much just define these routes. They can all be the same name as long as the HTTP method you're handling for this route is not duplicated. So as long as you don't have two users get methods, you'll be good. And it's really simple. You just pass in the function that you want to call during when this route is hit, and you give it a name. So that's pretty much it for the HTTP methods, and it pretty much supports any method that is standard in HTTP. Next, we're going to take a look at route patterns, and this is a really convenient way to sort of capture data in your API. So the static route, as we see here, is pretty self-explanatory. If this route is hit, it means this API parameter was matched exactly. If a request comes through, name static with an S at the end, then this route will not be hit. Now, for something more dynamic, for example, if you want to get a file from your backend, and let's say, for example, users are allowed to upload an image, and then when it's saved in the backend, you want to update other users' data so that they can see this file someone else uploaded. Well, you might not know the actual ID of the file before you can search for it. So you just want to simply allow any kind of path. And so what this does is it basically creates a wildcard in the route handler, and it pretty much tells Actix Web, hey, just give me all the information that is passed to this route. So the file path and the file name and anything else will pretty much just be sent to this catch-all function. And this is really useful when you don't know the exact structure of the URL. And if you simply remove this wildcard syntax and just have this path, then only the path argument will be sent to the catch-all function in the extractor parameter. And we'll talk about extractors again in the next chapter. Next, really quickly, I want to talk about scoping, and this is a really easy way to group related routes under a common prefix. This is useful for organizing your API endpoints and applying middleware to different routes. So say, for example, we have this API and you can get user data from it, right? Now let's say this second API, v1, you can get post. Now maybe you only want your user API to be accessible to admins. So you could add a middleware to this service which blocks users that aren't in the admin category. However, you don't want to block post from normal users. So you can scope these and then apply different logic. And this is, again, it's really helpful and makes it really clean. And instead of having to apply middleware guards to each individual route, you can just put them all under API and apply the scope. It's also possible to create nested scopes, and this basically just makes it a little easier for you to define logic specific to a particular route. So under API, and then we can create a new scope, which is /users and then a user ID, and then all of this route logic goes here. And again, this just helps with adding custom middleware logic or guards that don't affect other scopes and other routes. Actix Web also provides logic to handle route resources. And in the first example, when we first started this chapter, I showed you guys how you could create different HTTP methods using this .route for every /user parameter, right? However, if you use .resource, you don't have to define /users every single time. You can sort of just keep adding routes and extending this logic without needing to type .users. And this just makes it a little bit more clean because we already know that all of these routes are basically just different methods on this same resource /users. So it makes things a little bit more cleaner than defining /user every single time. It's also important to note that routes are matched in the order that they're registered. So more specific routes should be registered before the general ones. For example, if a catch-all route is registered first, it will match all requests before more specific routes can be checked. And so you just want to make sure that your catch-all route is at the end of your app initialization. If you actually register the /user ID route before the user settings, then the ID route will match user settings, and it will assume that the /settings is actually the ID parameter, and your user/ID route will actually never be hit. In Actix Web, a really easy way to register a default route is just to use the default service. And as you can see from the documentation, the default service is invoked when no matching route can be found. And so you can simply just pass a route.to not found, and this will pretty much be hit for any type of HTTP method, whether it's a get, post, patch, or delete. So another important thing in Actix Web is route guards, and these basically allow you to conditionally match routes based on the request properties, and you can use these guards to match routes based on headers, query parameters, or other attributes that are available in the request. So to use the syntax, you want to use web.get or post or delete or whatever method .guard, and then we can access the guard from the Actix Web package. And for this, we're going to be using the header, and this can be an X API version v1 and then to API v1. And what this does is it basically checks the request that's incoming. It says, hey, if it has this header, you are allowed to go to this route. If not, then it won't match the route. And yeah, those are pretty much the core routing techniques that you need to know to get started with Actix Web. In the next chapter, we're going to cover extractors and learn how to extract and use query parameters, query strings, request bodies, and other data from HTTP methods.